Thank you for joining us. I'm Bryan Elsesser. I'm the Senior Director of Sales Development at Aircall, and I congratulate all of you on taking some time to invest in yourselves and in your own career as we dive into another sales topic tonight. Sales community, pretty pumped up. We're going to talk about all the lot of activity that's been happening, all the noise out there and how to sift through it. And we have a rock star panel tonight to talk through it. So maybe this afternoon if you're joining us from the West Coast, or maybe in the morning if it's out past where Galem is. But why don't we start with you, Galem? Want to give a little introduction of yourself, what you do, and what you're excited to talk about tonight?
Yes, pumped to be here. So I am one of the co-founders of RevGenius. So I do that at night and weekends and basically all of my spare time that I have. During the day, I work as an account executive for a fintech company. And so that's what I spend my days doing. I got into sales about 2 years ago now. And I consider myself always have been in sales, and in terms of how I grew up, I had to really hustle my way to make things work. And here I am today. So that's a
Fantastic.
quick intro.
No, and great. And what a great group you got started here in just a short amount of time too. So awesome. We'll switch over to you, Chantel. Why don't you give a little intro of yourself and what you're excited about tonight?
Sure. Great to meet everyone. Good night for those of us that are on the East Coast. My name is Chantel George. I am the founder and CEO of Sistas in Sales. We are the largest organization for women of color in sales at over 2,500 members. We pride ourselves in creating sisterhood and skill building for women of color, specifically in their mid-level career. I'm excited to talk about diversity in sales tonight. I'm also excited to just meet with all of you great panelists and share the stage with you.
Fantastic. I love that figure too. 2,500 people that you have in your group. What an awesome number. What an awesome figure and impact that you guys are making. Fantastic. We'll go up to you, Sam. Want to give a little intro?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name's Sam Jacobs. I'm the founder of Revenue Collective. Revenue Collective is a private membership community for sales, marketing, customer success executives, and our focus is on helping you unlock and achieve your professional potential, which basically means helping you navigate your career more effectively and helping you get where you want to go. So that's what I do. I'm also the host of the Sales Hacker podcast and father of 2 dogs, one of whom I like and one of whom I tolerate.
We love all our children equally, Sam. That's how this works. Well, great to have you, Sam. And down last but certainly not least, Max, you're up.
I share the 2 dog sentiment, except it's seesaws. One day I like one better, the next day it's the other one. It goes back and forth. Max Altschuler here, founder and CEO of Sales Hacker, which was acquired by Outreach in 2018. So now I'm marketing or VP marketing at Outreach. And Sales Hacker is a living, breathing sales encyclopedia for B2B salespeople. We've got about 175,000, I think we're crossing now, subscribers. We're in year 7 of our business, and we've evolved from the early days where I was just doing some really hacky stuff in the sales process, and sales technology was starting to come out, and I thought more people should know about it, and I like sharing it, to what it is today, where the community has taken over. And I recognized early on that I'm not an expert on all things sales, but we should definitely build a stage to allow people to share their expertise and their voice, so it's out there with the masses for everybody else who's trying to do this. So here we are 7 years later, and it's been a fun ride, lots of learnings.
And it's an incredible authority and something that everyone's using. So we're super pumped to have you, Max, and glad that you were able to take the time out. To our audience here, hello, everybody. If you can, on the right-hand side, we do have the ability for you guys to interact with us in the chat feature. It's encouraged. We hope you will. There's going to be some aspect of AMA here towards the end. If you will, so kind of a little rough guideline of what we're going to do till about 6:10 Eastern time. I don't know where that lines up for you in the world, but till about 6:10 Eastern time, we're going to dive through our panel. After that, we'll take a 15-minute short intermission where you guys can pop into the networking side or see the expo about the different groups, or you get a glass of water. And then we'll pop back on to go and chat a little bit about our final thoughts. So we're still excited. We're really excited to have everyone here, and we're excited to hear your comments. Let's get started into our panel questions, though. So Max, actually, I'm going to shoot over to you. I love your intro to Sales Hacker there, and kind of you're getting hacky with it. Kind of fantastic description that is for the name it is. But you've arguably created one of the original sales communities. It's a place where people go not only to find that encyclopedia, but in a way in which they can engage and with others and learn. And so, with your podcast and everything else, perhaps you can talk us a little bit about what you saw as the opportunity that you were trying to solve.
Yeah, I think every good community starts with authenticity and a leader or leaders behind it who have walked the walk and talked the talk in their position. And for me, Sales Hacker started out as a way for me to kind of showcase what I was doing, what others might be doing that was advancing in sales, whether it was through technology or business process outsourcing, like virtual assistants, you name it. And then I realized that wow, there's really not a lot of sales education out there at all. There were very few programs when I started that had college, you couldn't get a college degree in sales. There wasn't a lot of places to learn about sales unless you got into it. And then I kind of fell in love with just helping salespeople in general, because I was a terrible student. I am not sure I could have done anything else than have worked at startups, been an entrepreneur, or been in sales. I don't know if I would have gotten a job in any other role or any corporate environment or anything like that. I was a C student. The SATs, somehow I did well on them. It saved me. I went to college. But I was terrible. So anyway, sales to me was always this great equalizer. Anybody from anywhere at any time can go in and make as much money as they want to, be their own boss, and break in. You didn't need family connections or family money or an Ivy League degree or anything like that. And so over time, it morphed into just being this place where salespeople can go and get an education, get some edutainment, we would call it, where we do these webinars where they can come and you can learn from salespeople, at all different types of companies on all different types of topics and get some entertainment value out of it, but also get, an education from it, where people can, network and learn and get jobs or advance in their careers. And it just felt like this really amazing way to give back. And I remember a sponsor saying to me once, I don't know how you do it, but I know you're a for-profit, but it just feels really good to spend money with you guys because it feels like I'm donating to a nonprofit. It feels like a great cause, being a part of Sales Hacker and partnering with you guys. So it grew over time. We were huge into in-person events. In 2017, we kind of saw the writing on the wall that that was super commoditized by every tech company, every sales tech company. We moved the business mostly into digital, which couldn't come soon enough based on what we're going through right now in the world. And then in 2018 sold to Outreach, and now we're able to run it without really having to think about revenue first. We're able to run it, what is best for our community, what is best for the salespeople that are involved, and it's been a lot of fun to think about it with that lens now and not have to think about revenue first.
It's in a way, what's interesting is so much is happening here in that space, right? Of people that are trying to find out more information. And I think what you speak to resonates with all of us in some way, shape, or form. And I don't even know the other three panelists that well to even speak on your behalf like that. But I can't imagine that we all woke up one day. I know I didn't say, you know what? All I want to do is be a salesperson, because I got news for you. It definitely wasn't that story for me. It wound up being a kind of an accidental. And so I'm curious, first and foremost, before we get into the second piece, what I was talking about with the content, anyone else have a similar story of how they even got here and what brought you to sales?
What brought me to sales was being non-technical and working at startups and realizing that if you wanted to work at a high growth company, a software company, and you didn't know how to code, then you're either building it or you're selling it. And I needed to figure out how to sell it. Otherwise, I wouldn't have a place in the world, because I didn't want to work at a hedge fund, an investment bank, or be a consultant. So if I wanted to work at an operating company, I needed to know how to sell stuff. That was how I came to sales.
Very, very logical approach to it too. I completely agree. Got to get my kids coding. Chantel?
I feel like I had like a very similar track. I actually thought I was going to go to law school.
Yeah.
And then prior to that, I had done a lot of like acting and theater, and I thought that I was going to do that. And I remember sitting one day and thinking about like the common thread between law and theater and performing in general. And it felt like just persuasion, the power of persuasion. And so sales is really just that. It's kind of a combination of just using your speech, using your verbal cues and nonverbals to prove a point. And there were so many commonalities, but I really liked how straightforward sales was. I didn't need to go to law school to do it or taking on any more debt. So yeah, that's how I landed here.
Yeah, absolutely. And Galem, do you want to round us out?
Yeah, so my story is this. So I was raised in Sweden and grew up there. And so in high school, in my senior year, we all had to try out a business idea. This was just a part of the curriculum. So I did this, and then at the very end of that year, we all had to attend an expo and showcase, our solutions, our products. And my teacher at the time was like, who in this class wants to pitch their product to a bunch of people? And nobody signed up. And my partner was like, Galem, you should do it since you're doing the sales stuff and marketing. And I was like, yeah, fine, whatever, I'll do it, So I signed up. I didn't even prepare for it. I just showed up that day, pitched our idea, and I came in third place. And I was pissed off with myself. I was like, I can't believe I did this. Like, I had all this time to prepare. I came in third place. This is awful, And I think that's really when it started for me of saying, if I can do this better, I could be successful in it. So that's really when the idea popped into my head, like maybe I should try out sales, but I didn't really have the right guidance because I didn't have anyone to turn to seek that, information and advice. And it took me years to get to the place I am today. So I think that's really when it started for me to just realize that this is actually kind of fun and I just need to learn more.
So there we are. We're all accidental salespeople. So in a world of accidental salespeople, we come in, we find Sales Hacker, but today we're also finding all these groups. We're finding these sales communities that you guys all represent and many more that aren't even on this panel tonight. So if I'm a brand new salesperson and I'm joining this community, this wonderful community of accidental sellers, where do I begin in sifting through all the noise of all these different groups?
All right, I guess everyone's like, where do you start? The first thing, and I have people asking me like, Galem, which community should I become a part of? Which one do you recommend? Because there are so many out there. And I say it really depends. Like, where are you and where are you trying to go? I'm not going to blindly tell you, go to this specific community if I don't know what it is that you're seeking. And it's not that I'm saying no to new members. Absolutely, I want to have new members. We just hit our 6,000 mark. But I also want to be conscious of that other person and their time and making sure that they're investing their time into something that's going to have a return for them. So if they're telling me like, oh, I am here and I'm trying to get to this certain level, and I know in my heart that, okay, right now we just started this and I don't think we can provide you with that. Not saying no, that you can't become part of our community. You absolutely can. But there are also other resources out there. So why don't you look around, do a little window shopping or digital shopping and see what's out there and see what would fit you, and go ask other people who are part of those communities and see what they gain out of that.
So it's a great point. And one of the things that you talk about is there's a lot out there. I think just outside of the community factor, there's also a lot of influencers. Max, I'm actually going to point this one to you. I think one of the big pieces of advice you hear a lot of people give is go find a couple of the influencers, follow them, and see what's going on out there. How do these communities differ from being an influencer through being in a group?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can gain sales knowledge and experience and expertise these days. It's obviously doing the job, finding the right boss to go work for, finding the right company that's going to, invest in you, in your learning and experience. And then there's, influencers that you can follow and join their Patreons and things like that these days. Follow them on LinkedIn. And then there are all the assortment of different communities. And to me, communities are like books. It's not like, oh, I'm going to read this one book and then I'm going to learn all my sales stuff from this and then I'm done. It's like you can go read Trish Bertuzzi's book. You can go read my book. You can go read Jim Keenan's book, you can go read a different book and you'll learn a ton of different things. And here it's, you can fill a lot of different needs joining different communities. No reason why you have to live in only one community or, pay attention to only one community. So I think there's a lot out there today, and it could be easy for you to say, okay, well, there's too much noise, I don't need all this, but go in, jump in, interact, engage, and figure out what's right for you and what your tribe feels like. I think everybody's different, everybody's personalized.
I love that, especially the word on tribe, and thinking about what's the mantra, or what's the advocacy, if you will, of your group. And I think that's a good pace. And over to you, Chantel. The advocacy is a tremendous aspect of your group in and of itself. Can you want to talk a little bit about? I know you're a member of a couple different groups. You want to talk a little bit about how Sistas in Sales really differentiates itself, and can be that advocacy piece.
Right. Thank you for the question. So Sistas in Sales is really laser focused on women of color in sales. At our trainings, our summit that we just came off of last week had 1,400 women of color in sales attend live, actually on the Hopin platform. Everything we do is within that lens because of two things. One, Nielsen reported a couple of years ago that the largest group of entrepreneurs are Black women. Yet when you take a look at the sales environment today, we are the smallest group that actually participates in the corporate world or in the tech world. And so that number is disparaging. And there are a lot of different layers to that that I'm sure we can go into. But because we are so focused on ensuring that Black women have a seat at the table, everything that we do is to support that vision.
That's tremendous. And it's unique in that it's so targeted, as you're saying, it's so focused on one thing. I think that's actually falls right in vein, Sam, with how Revenue Collective got founded, is it not? It was a singular focus.
Yeah, it got founded originally because I needed people to talk to and I didn't have anybody to go to, which I think is the raison d'etre. I'm sure my French sucks, but the reason that many communities exist. I think the thing that perhaps separates us, or it's just part of what our focus is. Our focus is really on career more than anything else. And not that there isn't a tremendous need for communities focused on elevating the profession of sales or becoming a good salesperson. But when I looked around at the communities that were in existence when we got started, there wasn't anything specifically focused on you as a human being managing and navigating your career, particularly at the executive level. So, the average tenure, people hear me talk about this all the time, but the average tenure for a high growth executive is under 17 months. And that's a function of people getting fired. That's a function of the pandemic. That's a function of people moving and the labor market being more fluid than it's ever been. But when you look around and there is one community that's not on here that maybe, that we should tip our hats to, which is Pete Kazanji's MSP, Modern Sales Pro.
Yeah. Yep.
Which for me, 10 years ago was really one of the early pioneers in just sharing information. But I didn't see anything that was focused on what should I get paid? How much equity should I ask for? How should I negotiate for that equity? How should I make sure that I'm protecting myself in those circumstances? Does anybody work with a CEO before? We talk about within Revenue Collective answers to questions that you can't Google. And the reason it's not a mystery as to why some of these topics aren't covered in other places, they're not covered in other places because often the counterparties to those negotiations are members of the community as well. The other thing that sort of informed the growth of Revenue Collective is, hey, let's make sure, not that we have anything against investors, not that we have anything against CEOs and founders, but let's make sure that the group of people that join the community are all relatively aligned in terms of our purpose, in terms of what we do, so that we can create trust, intimacy, and privacy, so that we can get questions answered that are, again, not just about not just about elevating the profession of sales, but about our careers. That sort of forms a big part of the foundation of what we're trying to do. We're trying to, in some ways, people used to say when we were talking about it offline, what surprises me about the growth of Revenue Collective, and first, the opportunity here does surprise me a little bit. And to the point of all of the people on the screen, I think there's just such a need for community because the job market is so volatile and because companies cannot provide the level of professional resources and professional development support that we all need in our career. But the thing that also surprises me, I guess, is that people used to say, sometimes people would say, are you competing with LinkedIn? And I would say, that's ridiculous. We have nothing to do with LinkedIn. You know, the ways that we interact with each other are really not that related to LinkedIn. And now, actually, when I think about what our vision and what our ambition is, it actually does feel like LinkedIn with an important twist. And the twist is, and if anybody's watching, you know, The Social Dilemma on Netflix, sort of speaks to part of the issue here. But I think the twist is that what if we all paid to have a profile on LinkedIn? We didn't pay for Sales Navigator. We didn't pay to scrape data, which is what Sales Navigator is, off of LinkedIn. But we paid to be a member of LinkedIn. What would be different about the way that LinkedIn treats us? And I think a lot would be different, because we would all of a sudden be the customer, not a user. You know, and somebody talks about how the only two types of industries that call their customers users are drug dealers and software companies. But you know, what would that look like if all of LinkedIn was oriented around not necessarily selling recruiter licenses or selling Sales Navigator license, but selling and renewing and maintaining the membership itself? And I think that's kind of our North Star. What does it look like when all of the people that are members pay us, and as a consequence, we work for them? I work for the members, and I do everything I can do for the members in support of their career. And that's different than when we were all getting together for sushi in 2013 with you know, Max and Dave Greenberger and Katie Sullivan and a bunch of other people in New York. So
I remember being at Yext at the time. Brian Rakowski would tell me about him. And Rucko.
Exactly.
You know, it's interesting. You know, both Chantel and you, Sam, have talked about advocacy. I think there's a little bit of time that we can play here, and it's not planned questions, so we're in uncharted territory, ladies and gents. But let's just talk about this for a second. The average tenure of a tenured executive, 17 months. I almost feel, and I put a post out on this morning, but it's common across all the different levels, is that there's low tenure in our profession today, and it feels like there's probably this opportunity now more than ever, just in general, for advocacy, for be it whether it's a member of a different background or a member of just a different level in terms of the career. That advocacy plays a huge role. How do these groups continue to change or maybe revolutionize this idea of advocacy in our sales profession? Open question.
Well, I think, again, you know, I'll talk, but I've talked a lot recently, so I'll hand off the microphone after this. But what I'll say is that the more heterogeneous, and I don't mean in terms of DNA or personal identity, what I mean is in terms of function and background, the more heterogeneous a community is, the harder it is to be an advocate. Because if you've got investors and you've got founders and you've got executive recruiters and you've got, you know, wealth management advisors all in the same community, it's hard to think of it as a community, and you can't advocate for any one specific position. So part of what you need is similarity, to the point of what Chantel's doing with Sistas in Sales. You need enough similarity so that you can have a coherent position. And I think then what you can do is figure out, you know, do we want to renegotiate the standard deal? Do we like the standard deal? The problem, you know, and a lot, again, compensation is just a big part of what we talk about in Revenue Collective. We just launched, you know, our 2020 compensation study across both the executive and the associate communities. But the point is, if we're all going to work places a year and a half, and by the way, I don't think it's specific to sales. I don't think it's specific to startups. I think people in general are much more fluid in the labor market, particularly when we all recognize that we can work from home and that it really kind of doesn't matter where you are geographically in order for you to participate in something. So if we're all going to move around all the time, we have to look at the deal. And the deal, particularly for revenue leaders and sales leaders, I just think doesn't reflect the reality of the situation. And, you know, a big part of our compensation as executives is equity, right? And equity, the traditional equity grant, is options on a 4-year vest with a 1-year cliff. Okay. Mm-hmm. And without any additional rights, because it's options to purchase common shares. And the point is, if we're all going to work places a year and a half, and a meaningful part of our compensation is structured around a 4-year relationship with the company, and that's just not, then it's not really compensation. It's not really true. And so it's about, okay, if that's not going to be true, how else can we restructure our relationship with the company so that maybe a year and a half is the right amount of time, but if so, I need to be paid and sort of worked with in a different way. And that's how, and advocacy is at the root of that because of the ability for all of these different people to align around a common function and purpose.
There's so much in there too around just visibility into what that actually is when you get that offer too. So tremendous point to the compensation piece, Sam, as well. What else? Galem, Chantel, Max.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking about the negotiation part of a new contract, right? Like we have people who are individual contributors and they're asking questions like, and especially in a certain group, and we're focusing on women here, is, how do I negotiate this? Like, what do I do? What do I say? What am I allowed to do? And all of those unknown things, territories that people either have never done before, or they don't know how to do it, and they don't know who to ask, because who do you go to ask those kind of questions, and actually understand what it is that you can negotiate. And those are some of the things that we talk about openly within our Slack group, whether it's with women or the larger group. And I think it's important to have that safe space, just like Sam talked about, outside of your organization. And that's why we have these type of communities, to bring that type of value to each individual, so they feel more confident, they feel more empowered to come back to the organization and know what to do next.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that we focus on, one of the groups within Black and Brown women in sales, is the mid-level group, like I spoke about before. And I want to go a little bit deeper as to why. We get a lot of messages from women that say, I was almost going to leave this career altogether, but then I found this community and I feel like I'm in the right place. And I think that's because at the mid-level of your career, right when you're trying to get into management maybe, or you're trying to figure out what's next for you, that's where we see the most resistance. And we are so invested into opening up the doors for mid-level career saleswomen to feel empowered and upskilled, to challenge their managers, to challenge their leadership, to give them a seat at the table. Once you have Black and Brown women in leadership, they are now in a position to hire. And that is how you start to change the paradigm of a company. Often, we see a lot of diversity at the entry level, SDR level. We don't see a lot of diversity at the executive level. And we see so much drop off at the mid-level. So at our summit, we thought about flipping it. Let's get the best Black saleswomen that we know of, that we could possibly pull together to be like the North Star, because people need inspiration. They need to know that they can visualize themselves in a CRO seat, in a VP seat. And we started with Bonita Stewart, who's the vice president of global accounts at Google. Probably the highest Black woman at Google, who just gave us so much inspiration and invigoration. And I think, if we can continue to foster those groups, especially, within the 5 to 10 year experience bucket, we will start to see a trickle down effect with diverse teams across the board.
Tremendous. So, and I'm curious, I want to go one more question with that, Chantel. What other influencers, or are you constantly going after different influencers to try to spread this word and get this message out there? Like, what's your strategy there to continue that mission?
I think it's pretty straightforward. We cold LinkedIn or cold email women, specifically vice presidents and up, and we say, we've got this community of women and they need to hear from you. They are on the cusp of leaving this career. And we know that if you speak to them, they might change their mind. And that's exactly what happens.
Wow, that's pretty compelling. Doesn't get much more compelling than that. That's awesome. All right, let's shift again and kind of take a step back. I want to go backwards again towards the newbie land. And my next newbie question. So we have a lot of groups. There's also a bunch of groups that are actually in the networking panel tonight, guys. So if you want to go out and see the expo, you'll see other groups that are here today, and they're going to represent themselves, if they will, on the right-hand side in our little event chat. But they all have a lot of similar names, don't they? At least some of them do. I wrote a couple down here that I was like, well, this is very interesting. You have SDR Defenders, SD Ready, RevGenius, Revenue Collective, Sistas in Sales, Sales Brother and Sisterhood, and so I guess there's a lot of unique and yet somewhat similar names. So my curiosity is, how the heck do I tell them all apart?
There's one, let me just throw in one mildly amusing one, which is that there's a new one launching pretty soon, and it's going to be called Sales Community. We're not the most imaginative, I suppose.
Well, no, but there might be a genius in that they are ready. They are ready to.
They're SEO optimized.
Yeah, they'll win the SEO battle. You know, there you go.
I love it. Yeah, exactly. Kira writes on the right, straight to the point. So, how do we tell these guys apart? What is there any way? And now Chantel cheats because there's an awesome website. Sam cheats because there's an awesome website. No, Max, you've been cheating for 7 years. But some of these don't have the websites even up yet. So tell me, how is there any sort of surface level that I could figure out where to even begin? Max, go ahead. You haven't talked much yet.
Yeah, I mean, we've been in the game for a while here, so I don't know how people are picking the names to their communities. But having probably been the one that's been around the longest, I'm super happy that a lot of these are coming up. And like I said before, like, you could be in multiple different communities. It's not like it's going to take business away from Sales Hacker. We were never going to get 100% of some sponsor's budget to go towards Sales Hacker. And I'm a massive supporter of Sam's community for the past 3 years or 4 years now, and I'll do like reference calls for him on his community. So there's camaraderie here between the community runners and whatnot. And I do believe that it all starts with that authenticity. So if people want to go join SDR Defenders because they're drawn to that, because there's something about that space that makes them feel that it's going to be most impactful for them there, then that's fantastic. I love that, I started Sales Hacker realizing that, okay, I don't know everything. Let's bring in a bunch of people to do. Like Pete Kazanji started the MFP being a sales ops guy and brought in a bunch of sales ops people, and he was an authority on that topic. So he was able to rally that community. Sam started a CRO community, and he was a 4-time CRO. So he was able to do that. And I think if you live it and breathe it, like as Chantel and Galem and these other community runners do, then people feed off of that, and it grows that community in that way. So I don't really know what to say about how people are picking the names of their communities or whatnot, but the fact that there's more of them available for people in sales is a huge win for sales in general. And to Chantel's point before about getting more diversity and fostering more diversity in sales, what you see on stage is what you get in the audience typically from events. So early in Sales Hacker, we always said we were going to do 50-50, as close as we can get. We're going to try really hard for it. Male, female audiences. We did a lot of work on gender diversity. We're realizing obviously too late that we need to do more with people of color. So we're working on that now. But I do think the fact that there's more of these communities, there's more, it allows more people to get into sales. It allows sales to grow. And we always looked at Sales Hacker, first it was this hacky thing. How do we get more companies using technology and modern processes? And then we sat there and said, well, if you're going to modernize sales, it's more than just processes. It's the people. The future of sales is diverse. The future of sales is a diverse place. And out the door are, the kind of old boys club type things, like tweed suits with elbow pads in hotel ballrooms and, golfing with scotch and cigars. Those type of things are going out by the wayside. And these communities are coming in and dictating what's new, so it's really interesting. And it's good that it's dynamic. It's good that it has a lot of different viewpoints. It's good that there are the MSPs out there, that are, maybe super sales ops focused. And then there's, Sisters in Sales that are very, diversity led. It really runs the gamut. So I haven't seen a lot of overlap or too much overlap to the point where it's oh, this is silly. It hasn't really felt like that yet. And
Tremendous.
I know there's Sisters in Sales and NAWSP that Cynthia Barnes runs, and a lot of the organizations that are focused on the things that they should be focused on that are really awesome. Like nobody's ever going to say like, oh, well, there's too many communities that do these types of things. Like that's nonsensical. So I don't know about the names. I don't know what to tell you about that, but I think it's amazing that for the state of sales, for the future of sales, that this is happening. So it's a good time to be in sales. Probably the best time to be in sales.
There's a lot of sales people out there too. So in a way, the more the communities that are out there, the more ground that's being covered. So I think that's tremendous in and of itself. I think it's a great point, Max. I want to switch gears here. We have so if you guys look at the bottom, or maybe you can't see this, but we have a couple people that are in line that want to come on camera, voice, ask a question. So what we're going to do is we're going to allow that. I have a few minutes here until we take our first break. Getting pumped. So we're going to go and take someone on live. We'll take the question. Don't get offended, question person, if I then take you out of the chat while we answer your question. But here we go. Let's go do it. The first person is Ashley Kelly Mealy, former panelist at State of Sales. Let's add her in here. I think it's also her birthday. So a very happy birthday to her.
Happy birthday.
I'm really excited to be here. My partner Gino and I are representing SDR already, so I know we're going to be chatting about that later. But I think Max hit the nail on the head with it. These communities are just helping all of us. I wanted to also comment on Jonathan's comment that he has on here about making it more inclusive. And I've noticed that there's people that are in a lot of the same communities together. So I know like Nikki Ivy's in ours. I'm part of RevGenius, and so the crossover has been great. So keep it up. It's been awesome.
Fantastic. And you guys, I'm sorry we didn't have wine for you tonight, but one of the big things for Ashley's group, I know you guys have your big wine events. What is that, weekly?
We do. We do Wine Wednesday weekly, where we take like a topic that SDRs typically whine about, and then we put a spin on it and give some solutions as well. But yes, Gino and I love our...
Tremendous. Okay, Ash, fantastic. Thanks for joining accidentally. Coming over, we have Nikki Ivy. Let's get her on here. I love that so much. Nikki will be joining in a second. And then we have also a panel question from Gino Donati, which we will get to in a moment. Gino, come on, Nikki. Come on down. Hello, Nikki.
Hello,
What's
Hello.
up?
Former State of Sales panelist, welcome back. And do you have a question for our panel?
I just wanted to comment on the questions about community. Love it. By the way, shout out to Ashley, shout out to all the other communities here. And that includes you, Sam Jacobs. I'm a fan. And of course you, Galem of RevGenius, and Chantel of Sistas in Sales. Our stories are kind of linked, right? Mine and Chantel's. I was in need of community. I was at a place in my career where I didn't even know if sales was for me. I had been the only Black woman on every sales floor that I had been on too many times in a row. And I had gone to LinkedIn and asked, right? I was like, where are all the Black women, ? Not in sales, because I couldn't find us, right? But then I thought about it and I was like, well, if they're not in my own network, how could I expect, right, to feel that sense of community? What work have I done to make sure that I'm building community within my own circle of the kind of folks that I want to see on the sales floor? And so I searched like Black women in sales on LinkedIn, and that is truly how I found Sistas in Sales. I went immediately, and this was more than a year ago, I went and immediately read everything I could find about this community, and it led me to their Slack community and to Chantel, who happened to be in Austin about a week or so later and was kind enough to meet me for coffee before she had to get on a plane and go do like cool account executive at LinkedIn stuff. And then I knew, right? Like I didn't know what it was going to look like, but I knew this is the sort of thing that I have needed all of this time to keep me in the profession. And so it's real what Chantel says when she says, look, our outreach to people is, there are people in this profession and they need to hear from you. It's absolutely true. And yes, it's part of the ethos of what led me to start SDR Defenders, right? This idea of democratizing access to this profession that traditionally has kind of a low barrier to entry and a potential for a really high upside, but was cutting a lot of folks who might benefit like that, folks like me, former teen moms, folks working retail jobs. out of it. And so all of this is just a continuation of that. I'd be remiss if I didn't give that shout out. And I built on that as well. Speaking of the cross-pollination, right? There are members of Sistas in Sales that are in the sales brother and sisterhood community that Ernest and I are representing tonight, which I hope y'all come by our booth and see, because we all need that. The fact of the matter is you can't always take it for granted that you will have access to that sense of community or inclusion and belonging. It's unfortunate on your own sales floor, but just knowing that it exists in the industry can be enough to keep people in this thing. And whether that's from a cultural perspective, like what Sistas in Sales and Sales Brother and Sisterhood are doing, or from a content perspective, right? You don't have access to direct mentorship and direct training and coaching, like what SDR Ready and RevGenius and SDR Defenders are doing. There's room for all of it. So Max, I think you're right. And I'm just excited to see everybody here and hope we can really make this what it's supposed to be, which is this inclusive environment and culture for all the wonderful salespeople out there.
Nikki, you are tremendous. Your energy is contagious, and I am so appreciative that you popped on here and chimed in. Thank you for doing so, and great to see you.
Thank you, guys.
All right, so I have the question on the right. So we have more of a group build-up question. What advice, any advice, open to the panel here, because you're all founders in some way, shape, or form, would you give to someone with a 9-month young community steadily growing organically? What advice would you give them in terms of getting it right, getting growing?
So I've had someone come to me a couple of weeks ago and said, hey, I am looking to build my own community in real estate. And I said, that's awesome. Let's talk more. And we sat down and we had a conversation. I said, why are you trying to do this? Is there a need for this? What are you trying to accomplish with it? Who do you think is going to join this community? And then I started thinking about the different type of models out there. Like, do you want to charge for it? Do you want it to be free, etc.? And when he came to me with this very open question, I had a really hard time to wrap my head around it because I didn't really understand the purpose of this other community that he wanted to start. But we really needed to sit down and have just a conversation about it. And we talked for like 40 minutes about this community that he's trying to build and really got down to the specifics. And going back to your earlier question about the whole name, and they all sound very familiar, my philosophy around that is the name doesn't really matter as much as what this place is going to do for other people. It's just like when you're looking to buy a new book about a certain topic, there might be books with a similar name out there, but what's going to differentiate those books is not just the cover of the book. It's what's inside of it and the author and the stories that they tell in those books is what's going to make you feel like that book is standing out to you, or that speaks to you, or you're learning something from that because it's something that you need. So sorry, I don't have a better answer, but
but in essence, what you're saying is find something that's going to, find a topic that's going to be able to drive, and then make sure that you have some sort of path forward from there. What about other advice to a young group getting started?
Well, I have just two thoughts. I mean, echoing what Galem said. One of them is it's really important. There's a guy that hosts like a LinkedIn Live thing a lot of mornings, and he said he was going to start a community, and somebody popped into the comments and said, why? Why do you need to exist? So I think that you kind of have to answer that question. Why do you think this needs to exist? And the answer probably needs to go beyond, I want to start a community so that I could be better known, and like from a personal branding perspective. So one advice is just clearly define why you exist. And Revenue Collective, as I mentioned, it exists to support people in their careers, specific human beings in their careers, not just the profession of, but really to help people achieve whatever it is that their career objectives are. That's why we exist. And I can answer that question. The second thing, which is a bit controversial, but I'll just throw it out there in the spirit of a controversial conversation. I just think it depends how big you want it to be. But if you want it to be really, really big, and by really, really big, I kind of mean from like a revenue perspective, not from a size of community perspective, then I think you got to think about whether it's free or whether it's paid. Because if you want to make money from something and the community itself is free, there's only one other, there are other ways to make money. There's a playbook for how to monetize communities. But generally, if the community is free, as we talk about, and I think Kira put it in the comments, then you're the product. right? Ultimately, you're the product. And if you're selling sponsorships as a means to generate revenue and to build this massive global business, ultimately that's who you work for. You work for the sponsors and you don't work for the members. Now, if you don't want it to be super huge, right, and you're comfortable with it, it's free, it doesn't need to be anything, I'm always going to have another day job, all of that's fine. I get it, but I think you have to be very careful about the decision about monetization because, again, like some people are probably turned off by Revenue Collective because you have to pay to be a member. But the nice thing is I know who I work for. You know, I work for my members. Whereas if it's free, you end up inevitably working for the people that pay you, and those people are going to be your sponsors. And again, on a very small scale, it doesn't really matter because, you know, if you just want it to be a side thing, as Revenue Collective was for me for a very long time, it kind of doesn't matter. But if you want it to be huge, if you want to change the world, then ultimately, this is, again, I mentioned the social dilemma because ultimately, like, that's the fundamental issue with Facebook and with Instagram and with these and with LinkedIn, which is that they're free. That's great. That means we're the product. And it's not, as Jaron Lanier said in the documentary, it's not that we're the product. It's that their ability to change our behavior is actually the product. And so that impacts the growth trajectory, you know?
Yeah.
So that's.
But I remember the start of Revenue Collective, like, you know, it didn't start with 1,000 people paying $1,000 a year. It started with 10 people going to dinner and shooting the shit on all things CRO. And you also had your personal brand and your, like, the things that you really cared about the career of the CRO and not of like what the CRO can do for your company. And that was like, you almost took this like villain approach as like the company that wants to take advantage of you. And so, like, we're here for you, the CRO.
I would say advocacy more than villain, but I hear you.
However you want to frame it. But, like, you took that approach. And so it started small. It started with, like, a niche couple people who loved what they got from you. And then, like, that grew and became something that you were able to charge for and so on and so on. And I think, like, that's how communities start. It's like if you wouldn't be happy doing it for, like, a handful of people, then don't do it at all, because like it might not ever be more than that. You have to really geek out and love doing it for that amount of people, and you have to like really believe in it. And then obviously your brand is going to be around that thing if it's not already. So like you need to be able to talk on it. You need to be able to facilitate conversations on it, facilitate networking on those topics. So I think that's really important too.
I'm sitting here now thinking about Halloween and my new costume, which is going to be the Revenue Collective villain. I have to figure out what color my cape is going to be.
You're definitely going to have a cavalier mic because
just dress up as a CEO. Just dress up as a heavily venture funded CEO.
Cavalier mic. You just wrote a book.
Heavily venture-backed CEO that throws equity around, doesn't know what he's doing.
They're on stage talking about when should you fire your VP of sales? When's the perfect time? Is it Monday or is it Wednesday?
There's the villain for you. I just
my
raised $130 million at a $131 million valuation, and
I'm
you know,
trying to do
and fired my VP as the first order of sales. Yeah. You know, it's interesting. So I back in the day, which was a Wednesday. Back in the day, Meg Hewitt and I were co-founders of the New York City Sales Development Forum. And I remember we had this whole phrase that said, if someone's not willing to pay for it, they're not going to value it. So it's interesting, Sam, it goes towards your comment. But that was the mentality we had with it too, is that there's some sort of perceived value in paying for content. So there's a whole interesting side of it too there. Max, curious for you, real quick, tell me, when you started Sales Hacker, did you have in mind at the get-go that this was going to be something that you were looking to monetize as like your career, or did you have it in your mind that like, I want to create just like a platform of like info?
it was totally a side project. It was a meetup that turned into a conference. The conference made money. I was like, whoa, I just made more money on this conference, and I was getting paid annually in my first job in tech. And people really wanted it. You could tell there was an audience there for it. We never monetized our audience. And I'll tell you what, the only reason why we never really did that is because I think everything has like a timing and a rhythm to it. So like,
right.
I think when we started Sales Hacker, and even a couple of years into Sales Hacker, like we couldn't have monetized our audience the way that the Revenue Collective, exists right now. Uber wouldn't exist if you didn't have maps on your phone that were good enough, right? Like Udemy online education marketplace wouldn't exist if cameras in your computer and your phone didn't become at that point good enough to be able to record courses on its own. And I think that, we're in probably year 3 or 4 or so of, the sales profession and just like in general leaders wanting to pay for personal development in this way. I think a shift happened and the communities have come out, and, it used to be like 10X CEOs and YPO organizations where the CEO would pay 10K a year and they'd get, access into this thing that they did. And, nobody else had that. Like there weren't L&D budgets and there weren't things like that. And, I just think, there was a timing for these types of things. And I remember, Sam, we were going to the Borays, and that was kind of like the first, this is interesting. Like people are going to this type of thing. Like, I wonder if they'll pay for this. So I think like Sam nailed the timing and nailed the approach. And I think like we that wasn't something that was like something that we could have done from the get-go. It's something we could have started later in Sales Hacker, maybe. But again, when we sold to outreach, it's not something that we want to do. Is we don't have to exist for revenue. So and then great organizations already exist in that area, so it doesn't make sense to spin up another one. Sam runs our podcast, and we're super happy to promote a lot of these other communities, and especially the Revenue Collective and things like that. So we're not greedy. Not everything doesn't have to exist on the Sales Hacker umbrella. There's so much out there, and a lot of these communities also is the person. Sam's a fantastic head of the Revenue Collective because he's been there, done that multiple times, and he lives and breathes that, and he loves it. Genuinely, it's authentic. When I ran the SaaStr annual for Jason Lemkin, I asked him, why did you start SaaStr? It used to be a bunch of answers to Quora blogs, and then it became like a media company. He said it was cathartic. He had sold his company. I think you can tell from his writing that he had sold too early. I mean, if you look at how well Adobe Sign is doing, and what DocuSign's valued at right now,
he sold too early all the time. He laments it publicly.
Exactly. And then that's why he started writing about it. So other founders don't make that mistake. And when you have somebody who's that authentic, that's the face of the brand, and who's been there, done that, you're able to go so much farther, so much faster. And it's incredible what we can do. So, I think when people talk about communities, for Sam, if somebody were to say what's Sam's moat? Why can't somebody else clone the Revenue Club? I just say it's like Sam. It's Sam's passion for that business. It's Sam's know-how.
Can't clone Sam.
All that kind of stuff, right? And
there is only one Sam.
Yeah, you can't clone that. And and
right. I didn't pay Max to say any of this stuff. So.
No, but it's admiration. I love what Sam's done with it, and I love what Galem and Jared are doing with RevGenius, and Chantel's doing with Sisters in Sales, and Cynthia Barnes has done with NAWSP, and there's so many different organizations out there that are just it's inspiring. It's great for the profession.
Well, it's actually a tremendous transition too. So what we're going to actually break off to do now is allow people a moment to go and meet some of these fantastic groups that are in our expo. So I would actually say, if you have the moment and you can go do it, you should go find out, ask the questions. What's different about the groups? What should I be able to learn from yours? We got a bunch of them over in our expo. You should pop over and go do that. The plan here, everybody, what we're going to wind up doing, we'll circle back here at 6:20, and we're going to do a little Q&A. I already see questions popping up on the right. Your questions continue this, and we want to get them answered. So please go ahead and ask your questions. And then what we'll do is we'll get a little final thoughts, and we'll wrap up. See you in about 15, everybody. So we'll get started with who's in the group. We had a question on the right. So let me just scroll back up. How has the management of your communities and your communities themselves changed since the world went 100% virtual? We can get kicked off with that one. And everybody just on your right-hand side, we're going to be taking questions. So go ahead and type them in.
I can take that one.
Great.
So historically, we did in-person events about two times a quarter in about 5 cities across the country. And of course, we cannot do that anymore. So now we are doing webinars. We had the virtual summit that we did on the 18th, and our Slack community has grown It has not, historically, we focus a lot on in-person interaction. Now with the COVID and the pandemic, we really invested into Slack programming. So weekly education, roundtables. So that's kind of been one of the changes that we've seen. And we are sitting down with the team in a week or so to discuss how we're going to continue this for 2021. But I really do think that we might just end up being virtual.
Anybody else?
I think Chantel kind of hit the nail on the head. We would do a webinar every 2 weeks, and mostly it was a big emphasis on dinners. And we would do like a survey a quarter, and essentially we moved. Now we're doing. Esther is manning our booth, and she runs our events program. We do about 30 events a week at this point, and we do, through most of COVID, we were doing 2 benchmarking surveys a week so that people could really understand the impact. And we just really leaned into, the concept of digital first. I think we will go back to in-person events, but I think the way that we'll frame the membership is digital first. The nice thing for us is that we had people, in Boise, Idaho, and Stockholm, and all over the world, that didn't feel the same level of membership as somebody in New York or San Francisco, because we were doing so many dinners and things like that. And now the membership is so much more equal. Now the organizing principle for all of these communities is time zone, not where you physically are. It's just, now the people that don't feel included are the people that are in Singapore and Sydney, Australia. But anybody on the East Coast right now, assuming that they don't have kids to tend to or anything to do at 6:30, they can be here, and it doesn't really matter where. Galem is in a tougher spot considering it's almost midnight there. But
yeah, my goodness, she's a trooper.
This is my life now. I didn't choose it. The lifestyle chose me. So here we are.
Well said.
I love it. She didn't choose the sales life. The sales life chose her. All right. As we wait for more questions and more people seem to be joining back our panel here, we're going to get into a brainstorm, a panel brainstorm, if you will. So brainstorming. Here's the things we're brainstorming. Books, influencers or people to follow, courses that we need to go take, events or content that we should go and opt into. What do we got? What's hot? Max Altschuler, why don't you start us off?
So what was the question? Events that we should be going to? Podcasts?
Events, courses, influencers, books. Give the gamut. Go the brainstorm. Go the distance.
Recommend some content.
Well, I am a fan of some of the people who are spinning off and doing their own Patreons now. I think David Gerhardt does a good one on the marketing side of the house. I think Scott Weiss, Richard Harris, Rob Jepson, Kevin Dorsey. Yeah, they've done some good work on their Patreons here. Good things about them. I actually posted a poll on LinkedIn, I think last week, about if people are in paid communities or Patreons, and if so, how many are in one, multiple, never heard of them, or heard of them but not for me. And I think the overwhelming majority were in one or multiple.
Really?
People are doing Patreons. People are doing, I'll see if I can pull it up here.
Do you know how many people want to respond to that survey? Because I remember seeing it and going, man, that would be freaking cool to go and dig into.
Oh yeah, you did take a note on that. Let's see. Gotta go to my activity. So much activity lately.
So while you're looking at that, can I just make a comment about the whole Patreon thing?
Yeah.
So I'm part of 2 Patreons, and it is a lot of information out there, and I cannot keep up with all of it. It's exhausting. But I also think that, I pay for these 2 communities, and that's all I will pay. I won't add another 2 or 3, because now I'm just spending a lot of money on people's Patreons. So I think one of the strategies that I'm doing now is that I'm rotating with different ones. So I will take one out, I will add another one, a new one. So the next one I want to try out is Koka Sexton's one about personal branding, because he's doing a lot of amazing things. So I want to check out his and swap that with somebody else's, because I just think that I can't have more than 2. I'm not going to pay more than, whatever, £20 that I pay a month for these 2. So I think that's one strategy. If people out there are thinking like, which ones do I join? Just try it for a couple of weeks or months and see what's out there, and then swap it for something else, and then, go back and forth on that one, because there's so much. And I just think it's overwhelming with the amount of information that they put out there. And you have Patreons, you have communities, you have your job, you have the books, you have the podcast, you have tons of information out there, and it's very overwhelming.
And not to mention 20 pounds sounds so much heavier than $20. So,
it looks like 32% said they're in one, 24% said they're in more than one. So you have 56% that's in one or more. And then 19% haven't heard of them, 25% heard of them, but not from me.
Wow. That's awesome. I actually have been thinking about going and checking out Scott's for sure. Someone that I follow and drink tequila with. So I figured there's probably something in there. Okay. So cool. So Patreons. One other thing on Patreons while we're on the topic before we get back to this brainstorm, but you would say that these are not, rather, better question. Can I find the same content or same kind of content in your groups that I can in the Patreons?
I don't know, because I'm not in any of the Patreons. So Galem might know the answer to that better than I do.
Yeah, sometimes, and this is the other part that can frustrate me, is I want to feel special with their Patreon, right? I don't want to feel like you're just using this information somewhere else. I want it to be unique to what I'm paying for. And to Sam's point earlier, that's where the value is. Like, now I'm paying you for your content, and I want to make sure that's only staying on that platform and it's not everywhere else. So when I'm seeing other people that I know, okay, you have this on Patreon, but now you also posted it on many other places, now it's not that special or unique anymore. Because now I'm like, I could just be like Max and hack stuff and figure it out and just find it somewhere else, So I think there's that from my information.
Tremendous insight. Tremendous. Okay, going back to our brainstorm. So we have Patreons. We heard a few good names. What about books? Got books we should read?
I got
Max, I have your book.
There's a couple of people, one of the things I've noticed, I'm teaching a CRO school right now in Revenue Collective for a group of badass VPs across sales and marketing. But I think particularly people in our profession are sometimes undereducated on just business itself, not the profession of sales, not how to be a better salesperson, but how companies run, how they generate profit, not just revenue, and how to think about them more conceptually. So I think these are well-known names, but if you don't know David Skock, he's a partner at Matrix Partners. There's a tremendous amount, and he partnered with Pete Kazanji and Mark Roberge on his growth, I think it's called Growth Academy. But there's the amount of free, it's an online, basically, curriculum on how to think about SaaS and how to evaluate SaaS companies. It's Skock, S-K-O-K. And he was on the board at HubSpot when they were growing. He's just a genius, and he's an operator himself. Of course, we did a great Sales Hacker podcast with him, so I'd encourage you to listen to that. But, and then Tomas Tunguz, who's a partner at Redpoint Ventures. Again, like, one of the things he does is breaks down 10Ks and basically breaks down financial statements in S1s, like the document that you file before you're going to go public. It's just really important. I don't know if it's important, but like, it's helpful to understand how the investment community thinks about evaluating businesses more surgically, as opposed to just like, our world of sales and close rates and opportunities. I think that's important. The last thing, or not the last thing, I'll always have more to say, but one thing I really want to stress, regardless of, it's not a book, it's not a Patreon. If you're in the United States, please check your voter registration, and please make sure that you're registered to vote, and please make a plan to vote. I don't care. I do care who you vote for. I'm not going to talk about it right now, but you got to vote. This is an important election, so please check your voter registration. Please figure out, I'm going to vote early because New York City offers early voting. I'm going to go wait in line at the St. Padua Church or whatever. In October 24th is when early voting starts in New York City. So everybody, and if you're undecided, I don't know what to say to you at this point. You have to have made a decision over the last 4 years, but whatever. But please just.
On the backs of that, some of the things that really inspire me in addition to voter registration, is I really like this podcast called Still Processing by these New York Times editors, and they talk about pop culture. They talk about current events. I really think that for me to show up every day and to be my authentic self, I need to pay tribute to what's going on in the macro economy, how Black and brown people are being affected by racial injustice. I can't just show up and talk about sales and business until I've actually dealt with some of those things first. So I really love that. I also love Michelle Obama's podcast on Spotify. It's extremely inspiring. It's poignant. It's in short 30-minute sessions about different topics. And so like I start there. I get to a place of sanity after I've listened to some of those really rich pieces of content. And then in terms of favorite books, some of them are pretty common that I love. How to Win Friends, Influence People is all,
yes.
a masterclass in sales.
Yes. It's funny. We just dived into How to Win Friends. We started diving into it at Aircall. We've built out a training on it over the next, call it 8 weeks. Once a week, we dive into it. And it's amazing how something that was written in 1936 is still so poignant and current today. Maybe the wording in it needed to be updated a little bit, but outside of that, it's still, the lessons in there are tremendous. It's a really great call out. Okay. Galem, outside of voting, you have to come here and register. But outside of that, what do you have in terms of
I'm not even a citizen, so I can't do that one. But
we'll figure that out. That's all side. Come on.
I will support you all though, and spread the message. So I do this weekly digital detox day now, and it's the best thing I've done for myself in a long time, and it's given me the opportunity to really spend some time reading, because it's something I always wanted to do, and I bought all these books and I never really made the time for them. So now I do have the time, and one of them that I just read a couple of weeks ago is this one, Stories That Stick. It's a really good one about how to tell really good stories. So after reading it, I'm practicing telling stories quite a lot in meetings and prospects and things like that. The other one I'm reading right now is this one.
Oh, yeah, Hal Elrod.
It's all about habits. I just started it this week, so I haven't really got that far.
Redefine your morning before 8 a.m. Go get it.
Yep. So
what
that's
day is your digital detox day?
What's that?
What day is your digital detox day?
It depends. It's either on a Saturday or a Sunday. I choose depending on what the week is like.
And you don't look at your phone at all?
I turn off my phone, I turn off my laptop, I put it away in one of my drawers behind me, and I don't touch it for 24 hours.
That's impressive. That's awesome.
It's the best thing ever. I look forward to it every single week.
You ever worry, like, what if there's a family emergency and I get a hold of you and your phone's turned off?
Well, then they would just call my sister, because I live with her and she can tell me. And you know what? If I wasn't living with her and I was living by myself, well, then these events in life are going to continue to happen whether I'm online or not. So it's not like I can control it or change it. So it is what it is. I'm going to live in my little bubble for 24 hours. And when I get back, the world will continue.
Great.
I think that's actually tremendous and probably so vital. We're all virtual, so turning off from a virtual device for just a hot minute is probably the most healthy thing you could do, even though I know Max and I were talking a little bit ago about nice to get some socialization back in our lives. But yeah, there's definite value in turning off for 5 minutes. All right, very good. All right, it brings us to final thoughts. So we're gonna it's a one last question. It's to each person. Sam's is gonna start with voting, but here we go. So it's, what is that final piece of advice that you have? Let's go try to somewhat on topic. I like to actually put it out there for the newbie, because there's a lot of newbies that join this thing, and we've recorded this whole content. It's all going to be shot live, and it'll be living for a while. So what's that piece of advice that you have for that salesperson in your mind that needs to hear it? Sam, why don't you give us a start?
Well, we're, as they say on Wall Street, I'm talking my book here, all of our books, but I really do think you hear it all the time in the leaders that I interview. Like this week, Tom Martin from iSIMS, the CRO. But whatever community it is that you join, you do need to build a network for yourself that will support you over the course of your career that sits outside of your company, and you need to invest time in doing that so that, people say, and I think the great thing about all of these communities is that we've made it so easy to find mentorship and to find support that it's kind of shame on you if you don't do it. You need to take time to invest in yourself. And that means you need a group of people that you can call on that have been there, done that, to ask for questions and to give you guidance and support. So whichever community it is that you join, or if you choose to join no community, it's going to be harder, but still do it. But build a base for yourself so that over the course of the next 15 to 20 years, you have people in a professional context that you can call on to ask for help and guidance.
Tremendous. Chantel?
Yeah, I want to echo what Nikki said, actually. Right now, we haven't necessarily solved the diversity inclusion problem overnight. We've made strides, but there's a long way to go. However, to Sam's point, you're doing yourself a disservice if you don't just get involved right now. Just knowing that it exists somewhere in the ethos is better off than how we first started in sales. And so leverage what your resources are immediately. It will make the biggest impact. I'm sure we all wish we could have been the community that we needed back then. And so here we are, and we're doing it together. It's not a one man or one woman show. It's truly all of us changing the industry together.
Awesome. And such important work that you guys are doing also. So fantastic. Galem, you want to?
Yeah. So my thing is give it forward, give it to the next person. So just, I think it was beautiful when Nikki came on, and it was full circle for me because Nikki was inspired by Chantel. I was inspired by Nikki months ago when I decided to, really focus on building out my personal brand and really get active, and then eventually start this community on RevGenius. I met Nikki. She was one of the first people I saw because I was looking for another woman in sales. Found her through some other people, I think originally on Twitter, and then migrated into LinkedIn. But I saw her and was immediately inspired by that. So this idea of moving it forward to the next person and not knowing who you're going to impact next, but just being excited about that. Just like I'm always excited about my future involvements with people. I don't know who I'm going to meet tomorrow or a week or a month or a year from now, but I'm really excited about whoever that person is. So it's just moving that forward, and then keeping things in perspective. So when we had the community expo just a little while ago, this guy, Dennis Walker, came on and he asked me a direct question about how can I, be more mindful of other people? How can I elevate, other people different from me? Like, let's say a Black woman. And we had a really good conversation about that, which is why I was a little bit late coming back here, because it was just fascinating conversation and discussion. And I think if you keep that in mind and how you can help impact other people's lives, then I think that's a great start right there.
So awesome. And there's a lot of stories that we've heard from the networking that people just get a lot out of that. They have some sort of connection with a new person they're able to take away, and I'm glad that takeaway happened. Nikki, you are inspiring us all here tonight, and let's go over to Max Altschuler. You can bring us home that piece of advice.
Yeah, for me, it's all about serendipity. Serendipity's helped me in my career so much, being in the right place at the right time. And you don't put yourself out there, then that'll never happen for you. So you have to do it. And there's no in-person events to do that at. You used to be able to go to a conference and meet somebody at the coffee bar or the booth or something like that. And, you keep in touch and they help your career. And LinkedIn gives you opportunities to connect with people and be seen, be visible. But I think getting involved in these communities, engaging, asking questions, interacting with influencers and building, a network of potential mentors, advisors, peers. There's few things more valuable than that, obviously, other than performing, but few things more valuable than that for your career as you go, and it leads to those moments of serendipity. So,
sound equity done soundly, in essence.
Mm-hmm.
Tremendous. And thank you all four of you for coming and joining us here today at State of Sales. So Max, Sam, Chantel, Galem at 2 a.m. Thank you so much for joining us and being a part of our conversation, and awesome. Thank you all for joining us tonight on State of Sales. I hope you'll join us next time we have it. We really appreciate it. and take care, everybody. Stay safe.
Thank you.
It's been amazing. Thank
Chantel and
you.
Galem, nice meeting you. Talk to you soon.
Nice to meet you too. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Good night, everybody. Bye-bye.